This episode of Little Witch Academia treads a very fine line of going back to the problem that was beginning to appear earlier on when the series began. The only reason why this episode gets a pass from me is the fact that Akko was able to do what Shiny Chariot was doing in the past, and that is bring happiness with magic, which is one of the things that Shiny Chariot was doing in the past and why Akko wanted to be like her and bring magic back to the world where everybody can cherish it once again. So that's one of the big reasons that really saves this episode. But besides that though, the episode overall, I feel like this is the weakest episode of Little Witch Academia. I mean, it was a good episode, I love the ending, but I feel like it's the weakest because it goes back into what we saw earlier on with the series. But on top of that though, the overall backgrounds to some of the art overall seem to have taken a nosedive with this episode compared to what we saw last week, which last week's episode, holy shit, that shit was pure fire. Like, that stuff that we saw from Studio Trigger in last week's episode, that was fucking awesome. However, this episode, it seemed like overall there were some overall scenes that didn't seem up to par as what we saw from previous episodes. I noticed that, and I was like, that's kind of interesting. I guess, from all of what happened last week in the last episode, I'm assuming that really just wore Trigger out and they needed a break or something this week. But overall, though, there was a noticeable decline in some of the art and scenes and backgrounds and all that when it came to the episode of Little Witch Academia episode 9. So the plot of this episode is pretty stereotypical from what we've seen earlier on in Little Witch Academia. It's Akko getting everybody in trouble by reviving this dead person back to life and pretty much causing it to where everybody gets in trouble at the end of the episode. Now, overall, besides the theme being very repetitive, it did have a very good, clear message towards the end, which I really appreciate. I loved that scene with the father meeting his daughter Miranda, talking with her and all that. She got to see her dead father, and then they just had a quick moment, and then he eventually passed on to the afterlife. And we had that scene where we saw the husband and wife, they were just, hugging and all that, and then they passed on. And that was a beautiful scene. I really love that scene of this episode. But overall, though, I feel like the episode, it didn't really have much to it. Pretty much Akko and them chasing after a dead dude, trying to keep him out of trouble for they can be fine and be completely out of trouble once they get back to the school. And that's kind of the main point of the episode. But eventually, they found out about the truth of this dude, and they decided to say, fuck it, let's get into trouble, and let's let this man have a good moment with his daughter, which that's what I would have done, honestly. I mean, if, you saw this dude that was wanting to find his daughter, see if she's okay, I can understand, wanting to be in trouble just to help him out, which, it's a noble thing. I respect Akko and everyone for doing that, but overall, though, when it came to the episode, there wasn't a whole lot really going on, like clearly the previous episodes of Little Witch Academia. Now, there was some world building with this episode. I mean, there was some characterization and world building. We found out about the headmistress, Miranda. We got to find out kind of about her origins, how old she is, how long she's been around, but also how she was in a time when it was the golden age of witches, where everybody was, pretty much relying on magic before the Industrial Revolution finally popped up. And so there was some world building in this episode, but overall, it was nothing too major when it came to the grand scheme of things of what we've seen thus far of Little Witch Academia. But on top of that, though, we get to see a little bit more stuff when it comes to the dead supposedly being brought back to life, which that is probably something I really want to talk about. It's probably the most fascinating part about this episode, besides what it was about. The dead being brought back to life is usually something that is very controversial, or something that is not really shown in a magical series, and it's usually something that's very forbidden, or something you just do not do, or something that cannot be done at all, even with magic. However, Little Witch Academia just throws this out the window, and shows us that the dead can be revived very easily, which that's the surprising part. I was like, whoa. The dude got revived like it was nothing. Like, this man's been dead for a long, long time, and he was just brought back like it was just nothing. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, usually when you're watching a show, like any show, live action, movie, anime, manga, whatever, usually when it has the dead, usually the dead stays dead. You can't bring back the dead even with magic, and if you bring them back, obviously there's consequences. I mean, an anime to reference, Full Metal Alchemist. Now, obviously, alchemy and, magic is completely different things, but overall, though, the point stands. When it comes to reviving the dead, usually it's something very taboo, something you cannot do, something that literally you have to exchange a life for a life, but somehow Akko and them were able to do it, and it didn't seem like it was anything that could not happen, because the headmistress didn't seem like it was out of the ordinary, so apparently it is a thing. The dead being brought back to life is definitely a thing, and that, I was like, whoa, 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 like, that's just, like, surprising, because it goes against everything I have seen normally from these type of shows. So, well done, Studio Trigger, for surprising me with that, because I didn't think, we would have something like that, the dead being brought back to life. Even if it's for a day, that's still impressive. I mean, you gotta imagine this, okay? Like, yes, many in this time and era of Little Witch Academia, they don't think much about magic or think it's very important, but I'm willing to bet you right now, science cannot bring back the fucking dead. Like, no, that's not fucking happening. So, magic still has a role to play, and if you can bring someone back that's like hundreds of years old and all that, and they can actually speak and remember things, holy shit, like, why are they saying magic is useless or not important? Because you imagine what you could learn if you were able to revive people from the past? Like, damn. So, overall, I'm just surprised with that plot point, or what was introduced when it came to the dead being revived in this episode of Little Witch Academia. But overall, like I said, I feel like this episode is the weakest out of the series thus far, but it doesn't mean it was a shit episode, but it just was definitely average or below average of an episode. So let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. How'd you feel about this week's episode of Little Witch Academia? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? I love you all so much. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.